detained in India for overstaying their visa. Watch this.
Please, ma, good day, ma. Please, ma, we need the help of Nigeria to help us. We have been in jail for 2 years for ordinary overstay in Kolkata in India. Ma, please, we need the help of Nigeria. We've been judged to suffer in the jail for 2 years. We are staying with criminal, hiding criminal in the jail. After all, they said we have to provide our ticket and go back to Nigeria, which we don't have money. How can we get that money? Please, ma, we need your help. We are more than 10 arrested since January 7, 2017. We have been in the jail suffering. Please, we need your help, man. We need the help of the Nigerians. We are suffering a lot here. The government of India in Kolkata in India, they said they cannot provide our ticket back home. We have to provide our ticket ourselves. How can we afford the source of money? More than 200,000 in Nigeria. The nation who want to deport person who cannot afford the ticket. And we are suffering a lot in the jail for overstay for 2 years. This sounds ridiculously. Please, mommy, we need your help. I need your love. Mommy, I ràn wá lọ́wọ́. Àwọn tájọ wà ń bí rè àwọn míì tún ṣe nǹkan lọ́wọ́. Àwọn ajú mẹ́wàá lọ nínú bíi. Ẹjọ́ tó lọ́ọ́ ràn wá lọ́wọ́, mommy. Please help us. We need your help.
Thanks to the Nigerian High Commission in India for the rescue. Remember, we can all always offer a helping hand. And remember, you can reach us on all our social media platforms, on Facebook at Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, on Twitter at NIDCOM_gov, on our Instagram page at NIDCOM_gov, and on our website at www.nidcom.gov.ng. I remain your host, Koinsola Adetumbi. See you next time.
Hello, it's Tuesday and welcome to Tuesday Live. And tonight it promises to be very, very insightful because we are going to discuss burning issues. Omini Odan is my name. President Muhammadu Buhari has signed the 2020 budget of about 11 trillion naira, tagged Budget of Sustaining Growth and Job Creation. The budget highly applauded as it is the earliest appropriation bill signed in December, and by the Nigeria has returned to one-year budget cycle from January to December 2020 for the first time in 11 years. President Buhari, who signed the budget on his 77th birthday, commended the patriotic zeal by the National Assembly for the quick passage. He has also expressed confidence in his administration's ability to finance the 2020 budget. The President has also directed that the 2021 budget estimate be submitted to the National Assembly by September next year, in keeping with this feat. 2020 budget signed by President Muhammadu Buhari is the first leg of discussions tonight on the program, and the second leg will be on the financial transparency and good governance. Let's take this report from State House correspondent Adamu Sambo.
Flanked by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, Senate President Ahmed Lawan, Speaker Femi Gbajabiamila, amongst others, President Muhammadu Buhari appends his signature, giving the go-ahead for the implementation of the 2020 budget. The significant and historic event was indeed a promise kept by both the Executive and the 9th National Assembly to return Nigeria to a predictable budget cycle.
In
I'm very pleased that the National Assembly worked uncommonly long hours in the interest of our people and the national economy to ensure detailed legislative review and passage of the budget within 2 months. I equally thank the 9th National Assembly for supporting important legislations such as the Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Production Sharing Contract Amendments Act and the 2019 Finance Bill. These laws are vital to the successful implementation of the 2020 budget. Now we are well positioned to effectively implement the budget and deliver our promises to Nigerians.
President Muhammadu Buhari described as welcoming the renewed partnership and mutual understanding between the executive and the legislature, saying this harmonious working relationship should not only be sustained but be made the norm. He directed that efforts be made towards ensuring the presentation of the 2021 appropriation bill to the National Assembly by September 2020.
I will work with the 9th National Assembly to give effect to the constitutional, legislative, and other actions that may be necessary to address the various challenges currently associated with our federal budgeting process, including the enactment of an organic budget bill.
The 2020 budget has an increase of 263.95 billion naira over the executive proposal submitted in October this year.
We have examined the adjustments and may revert to the National Assembly with a request for amendment or other relevant amendments. With today's global oil market outlook and our strategic approach to revenue growth, we are optimistic that we will be able to finance the 2020 budget.
Details of the approved budget will be made public by the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning in the coming days. Happy birthday to you. The budget signing ceremony coincided with President Buhari's 77th birthday, and therefore invited guests could not help celebrating him. Oh, he's a jolly good fellow.
Everybody understands the implication of having a budget that is predictable. That tells you that our economy is going to receive a boost, an injection that will see more businesses, more employment opportunities. And of course, we also believe that this is one process that will also support the private sector so well.
There's a synergy between the executive and the legislature like never before. Many are want to criticize that. We believe that we will continue to do what we need to do as a legislature, and the executive will do what they're doing. And the harmony that is between the two, guess who benefits? It's not us, it's not the executive, it's the Nigerian people.
Senate President Ahmed Lawan and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Bajabiamila, had earlier presented a joint birthday card to the President with a promise to support his genuine efforts at taking Nigeria to the next level. From the State House, Adamu Sambo, NTA News.
What a birthday gift by Mr. President to Nigerians. President Buhari sent the budget for 2020. Is the focus tonight on the program. I have with me in Abuja and also from our Just Network Center, two guests. Here in Abuja is Victor Muru Ako, Acting Chairman, Fiscal Responsibility Commission. Good to have you on the program.
Good evening. Good evening, Nigerians.
And from our Just Network Center, we have Dr. Saleh Bashayi Mumale, Natural Resource Management and Resource Use Conflict Expert and Permanent Commissioner, Kaduna State Peace Commission. He's joining us from our Just Network Center. Good to have you on the program.
Thank you.
Good evening, Nigerians, and welcome.
Okay, staying with you, what would you say, given the fact that Mr. President is signing the 2020 budget coinciding with his 77th birthday anniversary?
Thank you very much for bringing this very topical issue. on the discussion topic. This is so important to many Nigerians, particularly the relevance of federal government financing and the importance of budgets in managing economies and enabling the financial managers, as not only in the public sector but also in the private sector, to know the direction in which the government is moving the economy towards, and which has significant impact and implications on what and how the economy will be managed for the next 12 months. I think this is a landmark achievement for this administration. I think it's something that is highly commendable, particularly bearing from even what Mr. President said, in the last 20 years, this is only the fourth time we are signing or we are passing a budget before the commencement of the next financial year. I don't know whether it was deliberate or by coincidence that His Excellency Mr. President is signing the budget on his 77th birthday, so we congratulate him on the two achievements simultaneously.
I expressed strong confidence that as much as we have the global oil market outlook, he is very confident that the federal government will finance the budget consistently back to back. What's your take on this?
It is very important, particularly when talking within the context of previous experiences in Nigeria. We all know that most of the previous budgets for several years have not been adequately financed, with the releases to MDS being often very low and coming in very late. We have had situations in this country where budgets are released to MDS maybe 2 months to the end of the financial year or 3 months to the end of the financial year, and they are asked to implement those activities they needed to implement over a 12 months period within 3 months. And we have also witnessed situations where budgets were extended to the forthcoming year, possibly saying March or April will be the end of the financial year for the previous budget. This has not actually augured well for the country and for the economy. And it is very important now that Mr. President is giving this assurance. I'm sure he has spoken to most of the operators and managers of the Nigerian economy. He has spoken to a lot of people within the public and the private sector, and they have examined how they are going to finance and implement this budget. We also know some of the strategies that the central bank and the federal government, as announced by the Minister of Finance some few weeks ago, on how they intend to handle and implement the 2020 budget. And we look forward to that very seriously. We do hope to see that commencing January 2020, within the first quarter, all the allocations for the first quarter will be released as early as possible, and activities based on the budgetary provisions will be implemented. Again, it is pleasing with the statements by Mr. President, where he made reference to the differences between the appropriations submitted to the National Assembly and the outcome from the deliberations of the National Assembly resulting in the budget which Mr. President has signed today. What he mentioned was that they have studied the adjustments made by the National Assembly. And I think this is very positive again for the executive-legislative relations, and it means that the input of the larger segment of the Nigerians have counted into the formulation of the budget and its passage. And like Mr. President said, in a democratic system, there is a lot of room for negotiations and for discussions. And like he said, the federal executive will always refer any violation to the budgetary provisions to the National Assembly for deliberations. I think this is a highly welcome development, and we look forward to the speedy implementation of this budget. And I think once we succeed in 2020, we will open wide doors of opportunities for improving the financing sector, for improving the quality of services within the public sector, which will also impact the private sector and enhance or lead to the achievement of the objectives of the budget, which is addressing something that is so dear to Nigerians, and which for some of us, looking at some of the nature of inter-community relations, the level of conflicts we are seeing, tightly related to the weak economic opportunities for our young people, and it is very important that the focus of this budget is growth and job creation. And we really look forward to seeing that this budget implementation will impact growth and job creation.
Just joining me in the Abuja studio too is Bamidele Salami, member House of Representatives. Good to have you on the program tonight.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.
And staying on you strictly, budget of sustaining growth and job creation just signed by Mr. President, and Nigeria returning back to the 12 months January to December budget cycle 11 years after. When the administration said this will happen, it sounded like a joke, given the fisticuff we have had over the years between the executive and the legislature. It was as if it was a joke, but it has happened, and this budget has come to life. So, was it magic? How did it happen?
Well, nothing magical about it. You know, there's always this saying that where there's a will, there's always a way. I think one thing we must take cognizance of is the fact that the National Assembly is predominantly populated by members of the All Progressive Congress. I am of the PDP, just to say. But of course, the majority, more than 2/3 of the membership is of the APC. And in the previous years, what I think happened was that there was no proper synergy between the executive and the legislature, especially the political party, I mean the leadership of the political parties. Because if you have a political party that has a majority in the parliament and controls the Federal Executive Council, it should not be difficult to have some sort of understanding on the input they are bringing into the budget, so that the process of passing the budget, will not take longer than necessary. So I think now, we have the benefit of the National Assembly having majority of its members being of the same political party as that of the executive. But beyond that also is the resolve of the new leadership of the National Assembly, headed by the Senate President and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, to ensure that we do things differently. And from the outset, the Speaker of the House of Reps, Femi Gbajabiamila, has made this one of his core values, one of the major things that he campaigned on, that in trying to do things differently, we must also appreciate the fact that the economy is vital to every other sector of our national life. Whatever happens with the budget, happens with the economy, affects education, affects every other thing. And so he's made it a point that it should be a starting point for doing things differently. And he charged the executive to also ensure that bringing the budget to the National Assembly is not unduly delayed. If you look at the previous budgets, it's either the president brings the budget end of November. I think the last year's budget was presented on the 22nd of December, 2018. So where you have the budget coming in that late, and you want the National Assembly to do a thorough job in considering the provisions of the budget, which runs into trillions of naira, you will definitely need more time to do them. So the legislature this time around also challenged the executive to make sure that whatever we need to do, we do it quickly. Even though the timeline that was set by the House of Reps was for the executive to present the budget in the month of September, so that immediately we resume from the last recess, we started the consideration. That did not happen. But then it came in October, which is also not too bad. And then the leadership of the House decided that, okay, one of the ways we can also ensure that this moves faster is to collaborate, have a collaboration between the two chambers of the National Assembly. So rather than having a committee of the Senate holding a separate budget hearing from the House of Reps, the two relevant committees, came together, and we agreed on a timetable to ensure that, the two chambers will receive the budget submission from the relevant MDAs. We have the ministers or whoever is heading the agency or department come to defend the budget. Whatever issues you have, you raise them, rather than a minister coming to appear one day in the Senate, 2 days later coming to have, come to the House of Reps. So, and then I must also say that it took a lot of extra work on the part of the legislatures. A lot of us, had to sleep over in office in the office for so many days to ensure that we work to make the timeline. And to the glory of God and to the credit of the leadership of the National Assembly, I must say, we are able to attain this feat and return Nigeria back to the January to December budget cycle. This, of course, will engender greater confidence in the Nigerian economy. Those who want to do business with this country or with enterprise or business persons, organizations in Nigeria will consider the fiscal policies of government, and they can also only see this from the budget, that is passed. So I think it's a way to go, and it's good that we are starting. And you can see when the president was signing the budget today, he did say that next year's budget should be ready by September of next year, which means most likely we're even going to have the budget passed and signed into law earlier than we're having it this year if the relevant MDAs follow the directive of Mr. President to ensure that they have their submissions on time, and the president is able to also lay the budget before the National Assembly by September of next year. So it's a very good news and a very cheering one.
Okay. Victor Muruako, you are the acting chairman of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission, and Mr. President has talked about the fact that Nigeria has a predictable budget cycle. But if at the stage of implementation, all the concerns by the legislature, they worked round the clock, like he has said. The budget has been signed today by Mr. President, and Mr. President has also assured Nigerians that this budget will be funded faithfully to timelines. And coming to implementation, if it is not followed by the expression of the legislature, expression of the executive, will it work?
Obviously no. But I must first congratulate Mr. President and say a very happy birthday to him. He has given Nigerians the best gift we can get. It's now left for us, Nigerians, the public servants, the legislators, and all stakeholders in the affairs of Nigeria to join hands with Mr. President to ensure that this light is just lit now, bringing back the country to the right budget cycle in line with the Fiscal Responsibility Act. We are very glad at Fiscal Responsibility Commission that we're getting it right, and we congratulate the leadership of the National Assembly. They did a lot of work. We're so impressed, and we're seeing at least that for once the executive and the legislature, they're all reaching out to each other, working in tandem. On the issue of oversight implementation, budget implementation, obviously there is that fear in terms of the revenue components of it. But I want to tell you that the Mr. President's economic team, led by Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, the Honorable Minister for Finance, National Planning and Budget, and the team, they have taken steps, a lot of it, and they are still working with the Parliament. The Finance Bill, which is still in the Parliament, is coming up. All these issues will ensure full implementation of the budget. And you know what? The interesting thing about the budget that has been signed into law is that most of the fears about the 2.18 trillion fiscal deficit, about it has been taken care of. And I want to tell you that the economic team is at work on the implementation. The interesting thing is that for the first time, the capital component of the budget, we have assurance from the economic team that the capital components of the budget, the implementation will start in the first quarter. Unlike in other financial years, fiscal years, when you have the capital components coming up, probably select MDAs in the second quarter or third, but it will not be same this time around. The implementation of both the capital and the recurrent will start in the first quarter, and that's the interesting thing. So I'm not expecting any issue or much issue between the executive and the legislature on the implementation. There have been a lot of reach out between the two arms of the government. And I want to assure you that with the way things are going and with the cooperation from the National Assembly and with the team Mr. President has presently, which is set up the economic team, Nigerians should at least for the first time be in much expectation. And all the indices point to the fact that yes, there will be challenges, particularly in the revenue, but steps are being taken to take care of that. I can assure you that the economic team will be up to it. So that problem may not be as you expect. I want to assure you that even that from the end of the, looking at the deficit, because that's the side that will definitely agitate most analysts as to it. I think with what the team is doing, I think at the end of the day, the country will come to terms that yes, for the first time, Mr. President is actually, and the country is actually at the next level.
Okay, before we tie up this segment, let me just ask you this. What if this routine music, which we believe should be off now, comes up, which is funds have not been released to implement? And you have said that this budget is in consonance with the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Because you go to some MD, they say, look, we would have done this, funds have not been released. What if this happens again?
My brother, I can assure you that the challenges will obviously be there. But the economic team are up with the game. There will not be that story as before. But I know it's not yet to Uhuru. And we shouldn't expect we are yet there. But the point is very clear, that Mr. President have taken a bold shot in ensuring that we get back to the budget cycle, and that for the first time the economic team works assiduously hard to get things done at this time, and the budget has been passed, signed into law without much friction. I'm not expecting that at the end of the day that the two arms of government will want to throw away the so much goodwill that they would have earned by this action of both arms. I think even the challenges which a lot of analysts will raise have already been looked at in advance, and at the end of the day we'll be happy for it.
Okay, before we go back to Jos, you talked about the challenges that analysts are going to raise. Now, change is permanent. What has happened in Nigeria currently appears strange to a lot of persons. But the question is, why is it that when we see a congeniality between the legislature and the executive, people see it as defeatist on the part of the legislature within this picture?
Well, thank you very much. Before that, let me just quickly correct something. The finance bill which was presented by Mr. President together with the appropriation bill has actually been passed by both chambers of the National Assembly, and waiting the accent of the President, yes. Which I think is very good. You see,
and it's very critical.
The issue is that the legislature is seen everywhere in the world as the voice of the people. And in playing that role, there is an assumption, which to me is not correct, that in playing that role, it means that the legislature should not be found wherever the executive is. Now, that's a very wrong notion. The principles of checks and balances that are entrenched in the presidential system of government guarantees the independence of each arm of government. But if you also look at the provisions of our Constitution, there is also the interdependence of each of the arms of government. The arm of government is an island of its own. Every arm of government will have one thing or the other, to do together, especially if you're working, with a set of goals that are altruistic. Now, it does not mean that there won't be issues where the legislature would disagree with the executive. In fact, there will always be such issues, because as human beings, we are not meant to reason the same way. As an institution, our own job is to make laws. Our job is to oversight. Our job is to represent the people. So where the executive, is to implement those laws that we pass, we also have a duty to oversight those agencies and ministries charged with the responsibility of implementing those laws. And when there are occasions that demand that the legislature calls the executive to question by virtue of the powers conferred on the National Assembly by the Constitution, of course we will do that. Okay. But there is no gain in having, these two critical arms of government wanting to operate on two parallel lines. And then some people expecting somewhere that, every day you sit in the National Assembly, it must be about one, quarrel or whatever against whatever is happening in the executive. It's a very wrong notion. There are separation of powers. There is also interdependence of the various arms of government so that the people will eventually be the greater beneficiary. That needs to be set straight, for those who may not really understand.
Okay.
The people are the focal point of government. Okay. Whatever benefits the people, as long as the executive comes, whatever benefits the people, like they have come now to say we want a budget cycle operate from January to December, of course we can say no to that.
Okay, let's take
because that's for the good of Nigeria.
Edo State. Our first caller tonight is Patrick. Patrick is calling from Edo State. Okay, Patrick is off now. Abdullah is on now from Kogi State. Our guest should be from Lokoja. Hello, Abdullah.
All right. Good evening, Dominic. I just want to say congratulations to the National Assembly for passing the 2020 budget clearly. I'm very happy, and we want Nigerians to back and make Nigerians better as it is. Now everybody is complaining. And now as the budget was passing for this 2020, we want Nigerians to please join hands with Mr. President to ensure the economy of Nigeria is better. Finally, I just want to plead Mr. President not to forget Ajakuta Island Delay. Let Mr. President do something about it. Thank you, and God bless Nigerians.
Thank you, Abdullah. And if you're just joining us, the focus tonight, we're taking two legs. The first leg tonight is President Buhari signing the 2020 budget, and our second leg will be the financial transparency and good governance. You can join the conversation. Our phone lines are open. Our Twitter handle is @TuesdayLiveNTA. So going to Kaduna, where Dr. Saleh Bashir Momale is Jos, please. Sorry, not Kaduna, Jos. Doctor, if I ask you again, now with what has happened at the national level, if this synergy does not play out at the state level, wouldn't we have some kind of disconnect?
It is very apt and very relevant and very important, especially as the federal budgets and the state budgets significantly impact on the citizens of this country. And many of the states will be challenged to cue in to what has happened at the federal level. It is pleasing that many states have already achieved this. For example, my own state, Kaduna State, the Executive Governor Malam Nasir El-Rufai has already signed the 2020 bill, which is quite pleasing, and I think it is in line with the policy administrations of many other governments that are trying to pursue good governance and improve the quality of services. So it's very important that many of the state governments cue in, but in any case, the federal government is the major pace setter. And again, many of the institutions that influence the macroeconomic indices of most of the sectors of the Nigerian economy are more impacted by the federal budgets than the state budgets. So I believe that where some of the major and most important states government are able to cue in, and we have many states passing in their budgets within this the month of December and January, and we have this national synergy, then Nigeria will be far, far better for it. And like Honorable Victor rightly said, it is very important for us to understand the dynamics of governance and the importance of cooperation, the importance of engagements, and the importance of working together. Yes, of course, the executive arm and the legislative arm often differ. For example, most of the executive council at the national level always look at national level interests, they look at national level priorities. However, members of the representatives, House of Representatives, members of the Senate are representative of constituent parts. Each one of them has a constituency to defend, a constituency to project its needs, a constituency to project its requirements. Therefore, you always find members rightly advancing for the cause of the constituent parts, which some of the federal budgets, like the DG earlier said, we may have financial constraints, we may have budgeting constraints, raising, financing all of this is always problematic. So we have to set priorities. So certainly, yes, it's right for the members of the National Assembly to agitate, to differ with the executive. But engagement, positive engagement, and working together is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength. And I think this should be a strong message, not only to the National Assembly, but also to most of the state assemblies, that cooperation, what is wrong is, let me say, cooperation that is not beneficial to the citizens. But any cooperation that will benefit, will lead to enhanced service delivery, will lead to improved productivity, will lead to speedy execution of projects, is a beneficial partnership that Nigerians must urge. And I think this is where I will strongly urge MDAs not to begin to work in the implementation of these budgets without properly informing, engaging the National Assembly. This is very important. They should set their priorities. They should be briefing the relevant committees of the Senate, the relevant committees of the House of Representatives on the progress they are making, the challenges they are facing. I think these are some of the issues that bring some of these negative perceptions and stereotypes. But once there is this continuous communication, coordination, and engagement, most of these issues will be addressed. Again, like the DG said, probably yes, the deficit budget is very difficult to manage. You have to start looking for ways and avenues to get additional funding to support that. Again, some of the projections, the revenues projected in the budget were financial projections. The revenues may not likely come the way it is projected. Again, Nigerians need to be kept abreast by the executive arm for them to understand that, yes, although this amount has been budgeted within this quarter for this set of activities, the revenue generated within this quarter is this, and therefore only this % of the capital budget, particularly the capital budget, will be implemented within this period. Once we do that, Nigerians will see relevance, they will see value, they will appreciate and recognize what the government is doing and see the relevance of the partnership between the various arms of government.
Well, thank you so much. He has made a fundamental commitment that says cooperation that is not beneficial to the citizens. But let's take this call from Kabil. Kabil is calling in from Jos, Plateau State. Hello, Kabil.
Okay.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening to you all in the studio.
Good evening.
Well, I want to commend the National Assembly for promising us, the Nigerians, that this is what they will do, and they fulfill their promises. And apart from that, Mr. President, for signing the budget. But still yet, it is part of their own duty to make sure that they play the role of that oversight. Because we want them to make sure that the budget is executed to the maximum. Because we don't want the situation whereby Nigerians will keep on suffering, because, things are changing, actually, and Nigerians are having more hope in this government. So we need them to please.
Okay, thank you so much. That's more we can take on camera. But before we wrap up this segment, let me ask this, Honorable. In the course of implementing this budget, what the guest from just said, cooperation between the executive and legislature that will not be beneficial to the citizens, what if it plays out?
Well,
certainly,
I want to assure you that there will not be any form of cooperation that will not be beneficial to the people.
But it has been there before.
Like I've said, well, maybe in some instances, but they are isolated cases. And what I see with the 9th, assembly is that we believe we have a very heavy burden on us, and the burden is this: we have made a commitment to the people that we are going to be a house of reforms. There will be a house that will do things differently and in a better way. Now, when you say that, there's an expectation that you are putting yourself in the line of defending the interests of the people, rather than doing what was assumed, to be the normal practice in the past, or people going there to fend for themselves and defending their own interests. And you see, one other good thing about this, idea of having the budget cycle starting from January, like the DG said, is that the implementation of both the capital, component of the budget, the recurrent component starts the same time. And as a house of, as a legislature, we operate through committees. So each committee of the National Assembly also begins its work almost immediately, which is the work of ensuring that the monies appropriated for specific projects and programs are applied to those programs and projects as at when due.
Thank you so much.
So I assure you that, you start seeing a lot of activity beginning from January, to follow the money and be sure that the money actually is spent on what they are, what they are meant for.
That's now a wrap on this segment of the program, which is President Buhari signing the 2020 budget. When we return on our second leg, we shall be looking at financial transparency and good governance. We are not done yet. Don't go away.
Nigerians, our officers and men of the Nigerian military are winning the war against Boko Haram. Today, all occupied territories have been recovered and Boko Haram has been degraded. Our affected brothers and sisters are getting their lives back. However, they are now after you and me. In our mosques, churches, schools, motor parks, markets, entertainment centers, and public gatherings. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me. Nigeria unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The struggle for independence had been a long and tough one. Our founding fathers and compatriots sacrificed their comfort and even shed their blood. We cannot at this point in history afford to spirit away their sacrifices for immediate but temporary gains of today. Let us emphasize what unites and not what divides us. Working for the unity of purpose with a stronger vision for a better tomorrow. NTA, growing with the nation.
Nigeria, the only country we can train with remarkable potentials to excel. Let us believe in ourselves and change our attitude for the sake of our country and generations unborn. Let us revive our cultural values, which are our essence as a nation. Let us renew the spirit of patriotism and hope in our dear country. Do not take or give bribe. Be punctual always. No more African time. We can't expect to be global citizens and operate on African time. Join the queue. Insist that people are attended to on a first-come basis, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Nigeria, good people, great nation.
Make you report any crooked person, object or wakajube movement to police and security agent demo.
The security of our nation now work for all of us, plus including me and you.
Nigeria, make we unite against terrorism. The Federal Ministry of Information and Culture bring on this message.
Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying tuned, and you can join the conversation via our Twitter handle, which is at Tuesday Live NTA. The phone lines are open. On the second leg of the program, we shall be looking at financial transparency and good governance. The federal government launched a financial transparency web portal to enhance accountability and transparency in the handling of all public finances. This is to consolidate the anti-corruption fight in all ramifications to advance good governance and strengthen institutions. the development expected to be domesticated in the 3 tiers of government in line with government's drive for accountability, real value for public spending, and rebuild confidence of citizenry in its social contracts. Already, Mr. President has instructed the Accountant General of the Federation to commence a periodic publication to avail the public proper understanding of the financial transparency move. More on this tonight, after this background put together by Chimaobi Walter Naji.
With the federal government introducing an internet-based portal for daily upload of financial activities of 10 million naira for accounting officers and 5 million naira by MDAs, lots of questions are begging for answers as stakeholders believe, though the initiative is laudable, the issue of daily update may be challenging for some public institutions. The Financial Transparency Policy and Open Treasury Portal is expected to create an avenue through which Nigerian commitment to open government partnership will be realized by ensuring more effective citizens' participation across the entire budget cycle. The initiative, which will be domiciled under the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, is expected to put an end to all the sharp practices going on in public institutions.
The portal has been unveiled. It is now a public portal. Everybody can access it, and this is consistent with the government's position of open governance, which government has already keyed into. And coming to the issue of fight against corruption, you see, let me make this sweeping statement. If there is openness, if there is transparency, if everything is done in a way that it should be done, then corruption has no place. And this is exactly what this initiative is meant to achieve, to open up the books of government, of public agencies. You can see a number of reports have to be given, and accounting officers are to be held responsible. And we also have a responsibility.
The federal government's fight against corruption is believed to have been given a fresh impetus with the inauguration of the portal. The project will, among other things, encourage the federal government whistleblowing policy and discourage financial misappropriation by public office holders.
In Abuja, I'm Chimaobi Walter Naji.
That background put together by Chimaobi Walter Naji sets the tone for the second leg of Tuesday Live Tonight, which is on financial transparency and good governance. Chairman, Fiscal Responsibility Commission, Victor Moro Ako, thanks for staying on. And from our Just Network Center, we still have Dr. Salah Bashai Molame, Natural Resource Management and Resource Use Conflict Expert. Good to have you still on the program. Well, quickly, we have headed the financial transparency in Nigeria. This really has never been there. We have heard it in terms of maybe lip service, government is transparent, but this will be the first time we'll hear this. What's your comment on this? Let me start with you.
Well, I may not agree with you that that's the first time we're hearing about financial transparency.
No, first time we're hearing it and giving it a teeth to bite.
Well, we have always had government also giving, especially legal tooth to financial transparency. It's good that this government is, is creating this platform, for members of the public to track government spending and whatever. But the point I'm trying to make is that if you look at most of the legislations on financial transparency, the Public Procurement Act, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and other pieces of legislation, they were actually passed, some in 2007, some 2009, some 2011, and whatever. So what I'm saying is that, well, issue of transparency has always been in the front burner of our national discourse. But the question is, to what extent, has government been transparent?
That's the point I was making.
In the dealings, yeah. Even though at a point, after much resistance, we were able to have the Freedom of Information Act, which is as far as I'm concerned, the biggest tool, the strongest tool that the citizens can have to access information on government spending. Yet, the question remains, how transparent, has a business of government been at the 3 tiers or go. And if you ask me, not very transparent. We still have instances where members of the public do not have access to critical information on implementation of the budget that was passed, on their behalf. People don't have information on their tips about the cost of projects, about the contractors handling the project, about the percentage of work done, about the money paid to those contractors. Now, these are information that should be on the fingertips of any citizen. Just go on your system and type in, the keywords concerning that particular project. All these things should be able to prop up.
Now that it is there.
But for some reason, yes, it's not there. They are not all there yet.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. It is good that we have this mechanism put in place. But what I'm trying to bring out is that previous mechanisms put in place failed. Why did they fail? And how will this one not fail? That, to me, is the challenge that we have. Because when we had the Freedom of Information Act, passed in 2011, 2012, there was a lot of euphoria everywhere. Oh, yes, now we have Freedom of Information Act. But there's a lot of resistance even to access to this information by those who are supposed to give the information, who are mandated by the law to do it. So this one is a very good initiative, but it is still an initiative. I look forward to its implementation and a government showing the willpower to ensure that if there's anyone or any situation that is seeking to hamper access to this information, there will be consequences. But again, let me tell you one thing. One of the problems that we have today as a country is the heavy challenge we have in terms of access to the internet. Most of this information are supposed to be things that people can access in the portal and online and what have you. And you ask yourself, what percentage of the Nigerian populace has access even to the internet? How many states of the Federation have access to fast-speed internet to even access this information? So these are some of the issues that we also need to tackle in trying to, facilitate easier access by members of the public to government business, to ensure that government business which is being done on behalf of the people is not done in an opaque manner. People have, the information that they need at the time that they need, that information. So to me, that is the challenge now. It is to ensure that, yes, we have created a platform, we have established the portal, we have the initiative put in place. Going forward, how do we ensure that this does not also suffer the same fate suffered by other measures and initiatives in the past, which were meant to enhance transparency in our government? Government should, know that transparency is not a choice. It's not the choice. It is what, differentiates democracy from other forms of government. In a military government, you can hardly ask anybody any question about what they're doing. But this is a democracy.
Okay.
And it is the hotbed of information management, discussion, bringing up issues and laying everything on the table, if you want me to put it that way.
Okay.
So that's the challenge.
We are being joined by Professor of Economics, Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, via Skype in Maiduguri, Borno State, Professor Mohammed Mutaka Osman. Thanks for joining us on the program tonight. Well, it looks we have an audio challenge with him there. That is something that we'll get back to him. But staying on him, what is your comment regarding the raise by Honorable Salam on how would it be sustained, Prof? If you can hear me, Honorable Salam has raised some concerns regarding this policy in terms of sustainability. What is that should be put in place so that this whole initiative does not fail?
Question, let me hear you. Hello.
I think we are having audio challenges there. Let's come back to Abuja quickly. Now, Victor, you heard what he said. His worry is good initiative. What would be that thing to be done so that it is sustained?
Thank you very much.
Talking about the recently launched transparency portal by the federal government, it's good we understand it. It's one of those efforts, it's one of those reform, practical efforts, next level agenda of the federal government to ensure that government business is opened up. It's good we understand it. Just like TSA, which the federal government has insisted on full implementation, the need for all agencies of government institutions to come on IPs so that every government business, both those that are paid personnel, is also seen from the central point. This is also one of those consistent reform efforts of the federal government. The transparency portal is set up and needs to be managed by the Accountant General from the Ministry of Finance. The various MDAs had to feed in their own information on daily basis. For the accounting officers of ministries, like the Accountant General, any expenditure above 10 million must be reported on daily basis. For various parastatals agencies, 5 million and above. And they are to do this on daily basis, on weekly basis, on monthly basis, quarterly basis, and annually. There will be periodic reports. Citizens now have opportunity of just going to the portal, to the web, to find out the expenditure, who is the contractor that has been paid. For instance, in the course of our project monitoring exercise, which my commission will be on, we had some challenges. Sourcing information. I was discussing with Honorable about a power project in his constituency. We had some challenges, and obviously we're going to file in our report.
Where is this?
In Osun State.
Okay.
I was going to discuss it with him. We will formally do our report. With this portal, those challenges on its own will be resolved. You will now open it, you will know the amount that has been paid, who is the contractor, who received the money, when, and for what. You know the extent of the implementation of the project. And the portal will also give you opportunity to ask questions that will be agitating your mind, other issues that you may not have readily available. Talking about it as one of those government policies, you have to understand the willpower of Mr. President. Yes, Honorable is right. There have been a lot of beautiful initiatives. In fact, TSA was there before, but the full implementation, you can even see the willpower of Mr. President on the issue of IPs, whether the investors should come to IPs or not. Otherwise, you can see he's insistent. That is one of those willpower that is required to sustain such policies. You must not just have the political willpower, but you should also, even the person of the head of the government is very important. So I think, just like what he said, the number is you must have the willpower to say, look, this must be this. Even when you have the law, even when you have the policy, there must be that willpower to implement. And your economic team must be working in tandem with you. There should not be any discordant tone. Maybe Mr. President will have another. So that is what you're seeing that is coming at play. I think it's a beautiful initiative. The transparency portal is wonderful. And I want to believe that it's going to resolve a lot of issues. Just like you said, Freedom of Information Act is such a wonderful piece of legislation. But you can see there are a lot of challenges. Even in inquiry, there are limitations you can get. Eventually, with the Freedom of Information Act and with this transparency portal, which opens up every facet of government business, with a combination of such, and don't forget that Fiscal Responsibility Act, Section 51, gives every citizen of this nation the right to question fiscal issues under the Fiscal Responsibility Act. And you can take it down. That means you can ask questions on issues of national appropriation. Just that we as citizens should rise up. The second point I'm seeing from it, just like I said, what do we need to sustain it? Citizens should appreciate that they are stakeholders. Citizens sitting back and saying, okay, it's their business. The issue of party shouldn't be the issue. Whether you're in party A or party B, you should see yourself as a major stakeholder in the affairs of public finance. You should take the right given to you, not just by the Constitution alone, but other statutory enactments. Like the Fiscal Responsibility Act, Section 51 says, every citizen of this country can question issues of national finance. But the question is, how many citizens? The docility of our citizenry is enormous. Citizens don't even know their right. They sleep on it, they don't want to ask.
Okay, now that the portal is open, let's go to our guest via Skype in Maiduguri, Professor Mohammed Usman. If he's up now, I hear he's up now. Now, the concern raised by Victor, acting chairman, Fiscal Responsibility Commission, is the docility of citizens, as much as the Fiscal Responsibility Act gives them the right to know and ask appropriate questions. What role should the citizens be playing now? Should they still remain docile?
Yes, I'm not hearing you very well, but I got part of your questions on the aspect of the Fiscal Responsibility Act and also the transparency portal, as it were. In any system in which you don't have information, you don't have the required information, you cannot hold government accountable. So it is making that information to entire populations that will have access to those information. You can be able to hold the administration in question to their own responsibility act. It is just like you said earlier on, you started discussions on the budget. What we have to say is that because we are used to abnormalities, that's why we have seen the change of the cycle of the budget as something that these are kinds of the responsibility they have to do, but they have not been doing it for quite some time. That's why we are saying that there is a change and people are to be held accountable. So in terms of transparency, the most essential thing is that to allow people to have the information, and query those informations that they have access to. But the problem is that how many people have access to those information? Despite the fact that you put it on the portal, how many Nigerians can access those portals? I think it has to go beyond the portal itself. It has to go beyond holding people within the confines of their budgetary provisions. And therefore, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, the portal that has just been commissioned, will be very veritable to in the insurance good governance if the information can be allowed to be accessed at all time.
Okay, now let's go to Jos, where Dr. Saleh is also joining us on this segment of the program. But for information, if you're just joining us, we are looking at financial transparency and good governance. Our lines are open, and our Twitter handle is also open at Tuesday Live NTA. You could join the conversation from that end and raise your questions, raise your concerns. Now, the question to my guest and Jos is, if all this is playing out at the center, what happens to the states? What happens to the local government level? If they are off track in this, where lies the synergy? And what should be done to bring them on board.
Thank you very much on this another topical issue that has direct link to the budget that we just mentioned about, because irrespective of the budgets and irrespective of the level of resources that we put at the disposal of our MDS, once there is no transparency, the impact on the citizens will be minimal. And I think that ties to good governance. Good governance is very essential for Nigeria, and we certainly know that every society that develops and advances is anchored by the practices of good governance. And we all know that financial transparency is a major contributor to good governance, and whichever country or society where the leadership lacks financial transparency evidently is going to impact on the quality of governance. It's going to lead to weak institutions of government, as we have seen over the years for many agencies and parastatals. Therefore, strengthening of most of this transparency practices is very important. I must acknowledge that Nigeria has over the years put up so many robust initiatives and policies together, and tying all of these knobs together will significantly contribute in improving our accountability and the level of financial transparency that we witness. We do recognize there are a lot of challenges, and again, we need to acknowledge and appreciate both the governments, particularly the high political leadership at the highest level, as well as the commitment of the leadership of the National Assembly, as well as the civil society organizations that have been pushing very strongly these issues of financial transparency that has today enabled us to come up with this platform. I think the acting DG has already elaborately described how this platform will work and the kind of things we expect to see on it. And again, it beholds on Nigerians, the media, and many of us to come together, particularly the civil society organizations, to see how this works at the national level and by extension into the states. Again, many of the states have already bought into this open government partnership. I'm sure, for example, Kaduna State has already joined. Lagos State, I am also aware, have already joined the system, and I believe there are one or two other states that have already joined, and many other states expressing commitment. The key challenge is moving it down to the local governments levels, which is also very important because huge resources are channeled to our local governments administrations, and the services and range of activities that they provide have direct impact on the living conditions of many people. The kind of services, if you take healthcare, you take education, you take social services and social welfare, they are critical areas handled by the local government administrations with huge impact on what we do. And at the state level, the level of state investments in agriculture, investments in industries, investments in promoting social development projects, as well as provision of infrastructure at state level by various state governments is a significant contributor to good governance, to the quality of life of Nigerians, to job creation, and to improving the well-being of people, and again, with huge impact on peace and security in many of these communities. Overall, in my own assessment, I will see this aspect of transparency not only in governments or MDS just publishing their expenditures. I think this is just only one aspect of transparency. We would want to see it more deepened. For example, we want to see the level of transparency that has been exhibited by the MDS in policy formulation and program design. To what extent is that program that has been designed transparent? To what extent is it contributing to people's well-being? How are the finances, the projections, the expenditures that are to be met in financing that policy are corrupt-free? For example, are there no inflation in prices within that? So we want to see the level of transparency in program design, in policy formulation. I think importantly, again, we want to see the level of transparency in revenue generation. It's not only about revenue expenditure, but also revenue generation. There are many agencies that are responsible for generating revenue for governments. How transparent are they in reporting what they generate, how they generate, and also what kind of mechanisms can we put in place to monitor and make sure that it's the true generation or the accurate generation in terms of the assessments, in terms of the determination of the payments, if it is royalties, that all of these people are paying the accurate and correct revenues into these accounts, and these accounts go into government coffers. And then again, at the third level, is the issue of the expenditure, which this portal is trying to capture, which is very important. Not only providing us just the expenditures, and we have spent 10 million on this, but providing all the necessary details that will enable us analyze. For example, if I'm an engineer and you're saying you have expended X amount of money, the kind of information should be able to allow me to analyze that expenditure and say whether that expenditure is transparent, whether it is corrupt-free, or it is laden with corruption. So this is also very important. And then finally, we want to also see the level of transparency in communicating this information to citizens. To what extent are we making this information clear, simple, and understandable by vast majority of Nigerians? It's not just only accessing the information. If you make it too technical, you make it too difficult for people to understand. Yes, the information is there, but it will be of little value. So all of these levels of transparency, we expect to see it. So some of these accountability portals, the Open Government Partnership, and this transparency portal, we want to see it being broadened. And it has capacity to capture all of these informations. And we do hope to see it. At least, if we just achieve this fiat, it's significant. Like all other commentators have said, absence of information on what governments are expending resources, our resources on, is a major limiting factor in asking government for accountability. And I think having this information will be very significant in an open way. And I believe there are many civil society organizations in Nigeria today that will hop on this information, that will collect this information, that will analyze this information, and that will engage government. But what I urge us all to do is to go on constructive engagements. Rather than taking the confrontational perspectives, let us take the constructive perspectives by engaging these MDAs, by engaging them, understanding what they do, and asking them to fully account. And where they fail, we refer them to the appropriate institutions of government, the various legal instruments that have been put in place, as well as the National Assembly, to put feet to all the informations and all our questions on the aspects of transparency. And I think public sector workers are very important, and capacity development for these workers to be able to do this is very important. We should not just ask them to upload this information. We need to give them capacity to understand the relevance of this information, how to put this information, and how well to manage, and how to respond to our questions and inquiries as citizens when we direct these questions. Because once this information are available and they are just there on the portal, you ask questions and you don't have responses, then the relevance of this open government partnership will become limited.
Okay, now let's go back to Skype in Maiduguri. Given the issues raised by Dr. Saleh, where lies sanctions? Sanctions is key here because communication, effective communication, but if you communicate and you're economical with the truth and you don't open your messages to the understanding of the citizens, what should the MDA suffer in terms of sanctions?
Yes, you know, the information, the financial transparency is very important in the sense that in the two-way, the input, the output, as well as the end user of the information. So the most essential thing, one, is to say how this information is sourced, how it's translated for the end user, and to what extent do that end user utilize those information to ask the relevant questions concerning the finances of governments and institutions that are related to those specific issues. Let's take, for instance, Nigeria is not new to these kinds of process. If you take, for instance, the Nigerian Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, they source information, they give out information to the public in order for the public to pursue those issues that has been raised in that information. And therefore, the MDAs, the staff, and the end users must be trained in such a way way that they provide the veritable tool to ask relevant questions and also deal with some of the issues. Like it has been said, without, even if you take the entire revenue, then there need to be explanations on what expenditures specifically you entail. Oh my God.
Signals there. That's beyond us here. Quickly, we are still looking at financial transparency and good governance. We have a couple of tweets here already. When we return after the Vox Pop, like we said, Tuesday Live is an audience participatory program. We went to town to listen to what Nigerians said about this whole initiative. Let's take a listen, and when we return, we'll go to our Twitter handle to take some tweets of the questions and concerns raised by Nigerians. Don't go away.
Seeing governance will allow us to move forward. Open governance, transparency in governance will benefit the masses in such a way that whatever is due to the masses, they will be able to get it, and they will be able to, poverty will be eradicated, or it will be reduced to a certain level, and everybody will enjoy that. So at the grassroots level, it's covered, things will move forward. People will have confidence in government. People will have confidence in their leadership. With that, we'll go a long way to improve as a country.
Well, if there's transparency, as a matter of fact, it's going to affect very positively to Nigerian society and the public. That means that, people are going to be effective and efficient in doing their job, because no person is going to be biased as to what he is doing, because he expects that at the end of the day, he's going to have a result that is going to be, very, very fruitful. It will help a lot to maybe the fight against corruption.
Democracy, in its definition, is supposed to be government for the people. It's by the people. So we are all supposed to be carried along together. So if we are all aware of what is going on, if policies are being created, they will directly affect the people, because it's what the people want that will be taken to the lawmakers and to in turn be turned to policies which will be for the good of the general public.
A good idea, a welcome idea. Yes, it promotes transparency and ultimately development. Where there's transparency, there will be development. Because everybody, most of the people will be carried along by the activities of government. They will see that the government is theirs. They will key into it, they will buy into the government and the programs of the government, where there's open government. And once there's the people have the confidence in government and they buy into the programs and activities and policies of government, that is the panacea for development. That is the necessary, required condition for development. And not just development, but even development. Development will spread around, people will feel a sense of belonging, people will identify with the government, they will be proud that this is their government, this is their country.
Open governance, it has a very good role to play in terms of fighting corruption. Once there is openness in the governance, do you understand? It will be easier for people to detect whether something is going wrong or the other way.
Transparency in this country, many things will get better. You understand what I'm saying? Because, for instance, now we are talking about the increment in the tax and co. But many people are grumbling, in other words, they don't want to pay the tax. Why? Because even they are not even, be sure of the one they are paying before. Because there's no transparency. They don't even know how the government is making use of the one they are paying. So if there's transparency and people know that, for instance, let me cite an example for you for Lagos State. You understand? During Raji Fashola, he introduced a lot of taxes into the nation, into the states, for instance. But when people realize that what Raji Fashola is doing to Lagos State is a better thing, many people took themselves to the states and they want to pay. And more money were coming into the cough of government in Lagos State, and Raji Fashola was able to develop Lagos State better.
So transparency will help us better in this nation if the government can open up to the people and the people realize that what they were paying for is going to be for the betterment of the people. Definitely, there will be better in the nation.
If the financial activities are transparent and open to the masses, those on the seats will know that the masses are on the watch and they will be cautious of what they do. They would not want to misappropriate the funds, and so it will reduce the crime rates and economic instability.
Well, reactions by Nigerians there on the financial transparency and good governance. Well, before we went to town for the Vox Pop, we told you a couple of tweets have come on our Twitter handle, which is @TuesdayLiveNT, the very first one. Please, if you send your tweets on the budget, we might not take one on budget anymore because for want of time. So we'll just concentrate the tweets on the financial transparency and good governance. Please bear with us. Quickly, the very first one from me, Walter 11, says, please, most Nigerians don't know the link to the transparency portal. Kindly tell us the link to the portal. Now, let me allow Victor Muruako, Acting Chairman, Fiscal Responsibility Commission, to address that.
Well, very well. The transparency portal of the federal government is a very open one. It's open treasury.gov.ng. Open treasury, one word, .gov.ng. If you open it now, you will have the information as we speak.
Are we opening it to just send all kinds of garbage or constructive information?
No, there are basic information to expect. This information coming from the Federal Ministry of Finance is managed by the Office of the Accountant General. The various MDAs, they have their input. They report on it. And the relevant information they feed in, they can also give you further information on inquiry. If you ask a pertinent question which is not contained, definitely there are managers who will respond to you. And the interesting thing about this transparency portal is that it has a timeline. At the end of every month, you have 14 days to file in your report on it. So, it's a special one.
It's opened online, real time, 24 hours.
Yeah, sure. There are dedicated managers.
Can you read it out again for the benefit of the public?
Open treasury, one word, .gov.ng.
Okay, thank you. We'll take other tweets now. Pastor Edward says the early passage of the budget and the open governance mechanism is commendable. The next level is for Nigerians to participate in the budget monitoring by asking the right questions and join in oversight of all projects and programs of government. This is coming from Dr. Ayodele Edwards. The other one says, Wale Bale says, financial transparency and good governance starts when we know the monthly take-home of the political office holders. Can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, of course. It is the rights of every Nigerian to have full information as to what anybody who is in public office earns. The moment you transit from being a private citizen into public office holder, there's virtually nothing again about you that should be secret. The salary you earn, the allowances you earn, your income must be ascertainable, must be accessible by those that you superintend over. And I think there's the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission, which is the body that determines salaries and wages and so on of everyone, including those, especially members of the political class, those who hold political offices. But you see, intertwined to this also is the issue of citizens' engagement, which I can see has become a recurring issue in this discourse. It is very important that as citizens, we generate more interest in the activities of government, and we'll be ready to go the extra mile in utilizing the provisions encapsulated in those laws to access information. Like you rightly said, in the Fiscal Responsibility Act, there are provisions which entitle citizens. In fact, it goes to the extent of trying to remove, usually when you go to court on some issues, the lawyers will come and say you don't have a locus. You know, it says you don't even have to have a locus. You don't have to have any particular pecuniary interest or whatever interest. The fact that you are a citizen entitles you to, pursue and ask for those information and get them. But again, the challenge will be that in some cases, even the cost of approaching the courts to get, to get justice, as it were, or to file through the various processes will be cumbersome. But then, if the civil society can focus more attention now on engaging the citizens on open government and transparency, and giving people all the information that they need to have, because, the media is trying its own bit, but it's not enough. Many people are not even aware of, some of these things and the provisions already in those laws which enables them or entitles them to get those information. So if you need to have an information on what a public officer earns, it should be just a matter of writing to the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission or invoking the relevant section of the Freedom of Information Act to ask that portion of the information on public expenditure be disclosed, and the officer in whose custody those information is duty bound to provide them. Although I must not shy away from the fact that there's always a resistance, very huge resistance. Let me give you an instance. There are agencies even in government that do not even want, institutions in government to have access to their books. I'm a member of the National Assembly. I've had instances where some agencies of government will prove so difficult when it comes to oversight. They don't want you to see their books. They don't want you to have access to, information on certain expenditure head and what have you. Now, but with persistence, especially when you are on the right side of the law, you know that you will get what you need. So we need to, as citizens, be more persistent, and then we need to have the civil society doing more engagement and enlightenment so that members of the public will know those things that are enabled by virtue of the provisions of the existing law that they can invoke to ask for information and get information and follow through with it. SEDAP is doing a lot in this regard now. Going to court, recently they went to court about the pension that was being collected by some former governors who are now senators or ministers, and they went to court and they challenged it. Eventually the court ruled that it is against the provision of the Constitution of Nigeria for anyone to earn double pension. If you had been a former governor and you are earning a pension, you have been a public office holder before you become governor, you are earning a pension, you again, you are leaving the Senate or the House of Reps, and then there's another provision on what you can get in terms of severance allowance. That is a multiplicity of drawing funds from the same source. So the citizens have to be well up and doing, but the civil society has to be very, very helpful in this regard to ensure that members of the public also know that the laws, especially the FOI Act, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, provides that citizens can approach agencies and ask for specific information on public expenditure. And if you are not given, you have a right to go to court, you have a right to receive another mandamus, and the court should compel that such information, be given to the members of the public.
Okay, before I go to other centers, JAWS and Skype, the last two here, this one says from Mustafa, how we monitor government transparency on spending funds, on how it is going to be sustained after this administration. I think we addressed that before now, I believe.
When you have institutions, yes, that's the important thing. It's not about one person or one man. It's about having an institution and having, a citizenry that is able to insist on the right things being done.
Okay, the last one, it says, transparency is one of the world's most successful centers of financial and other services, provided the commodity trading institution. Well, let's go to JAWS now, to Dr. Saleh. Dr. Saleh, is it possible that if there are no safeguards, Nigerians may want to change this portal to partisanship?
understanding, the portal is a government portal managed from the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation. So it means that nobody has access to feed information into the portal, if I am correct. It is only approved or line officers of relevant MDAs that have access to put in information into that portal. And the type of information that will be put out in that portal will be information relating to the financial expenditures of that MDA within the defined reporting period. So if my understanding and the understanding of many others is correct, we do not expect to see people being able to fit in information that is not relevant into the portal, because it is a specialized, institutionally based portal. And most of the internet management information on the internet today is very simple. It's not as difficult or as complex as it used to do in the past. So it's quite easy. The only challenge, like I said, is developing the framework by which each MDA will fit in its information, taking into cognizance that there are multiple MDAs performing different types of functions, providing varied types of services. So it means that the portal must take cognizance into the various types of services and functions that are performed by these MDAs, and it must be versatile enough to accommodate and allow feeding in information from all of these MDAs, irrespective of the range of services or the kind of contracts or the types of works they do. And like I said again, for it to be more valuable to Nigerians, there is also need for additional information, also with respect to the revenue generating agencies, or like we know, many other MDAs also generate one form of revenue or the other. So it means it will also be useful if we have the revenue profile from that. And then again, when they are awarding that contract, for example, for the provision of services or for the provision of works, then they have to also, that portal should be able to give us some relevant information with respect to the details of some of those contracts that they award. For example, if an MDA is reporting that they have awarded a contract of 50 million within the last month to X company to perform X functions, then it will be more useful again to put additional information. For example, the bill of quantities for that particular works. For example, if it is a training program, we would want to see how much have been allocated to resource persons, how much have been allocated to the beneficiaries of the training, and some of this detailed information that will enable us to more objectively evaluate. So that will give civil society organizations, will give professionals within that organization to arrive at a valid judgment to say that yes, this is a work that this MDA has done in line with all the transparency principles that have been outlined in all the laws of Nigeria, and that the outcome of this will be highly beneficial to citizens. So if I am a trainee, I am to attend a workshop, and I went there, and maybe in the portal it said I will be given a hotel accommodation of 15,000 naira, and I see myself in a hotel accommodation of 5 or 10 or 6,000 naira, I will ask the question. By the portal, what I saw in the bill of quantity for this work is that I will be given a good hotel accommodation and I will be fed well, and why are you giving me this? So people now have basis and the requisite information to ask. Like we are doing in many other institutions, in some of the open contracting and some of the projects, we ask for bill of quantities even for constructions, let's say a school. Once the community have access to that information, they know the bill of quantities, they will ask the contractor, why are you using 6 inches block instead of 9 inches as contained in your bill of quantities? Why are you using 10 bags of cement instead of 20 as contained in your bill of quantities? So these are the detailed information that this portal should provide. And once this framework is established, I think we have a very strong basis to hold MDS accountable, to reduce the level of non-transparency, and to strengthen governance, and which over time will lead to the strengthening of these key institutions that will propel more rapid and sustainable growth and development for our country.
Vic, Nigeria is multilingual and communication is key here. I remember one of the guests from here or from Skype said the language, if it is too technical, if it is hyphenating, people might not understand. Is it possible to have this portal fed with other languages, the major ones, besides the official language. Because somebody may ask tomorrow, this portal is discriminatory, this portal is segregational. For those who don't understand, they received English, maybe they understand their other languages. Any plans to this?
Well, thank you very much on this. The most important thing is that this initiative is on. At least federal government is implementing the transparency portal. That's the starting point. There will be other dynamics that will play out according to the needs. Other issues, as they come up, I'm very sure that the federal government, particularly the Ministry of Finance, will equally respond to some of those demands, like the issue of bilingual nature of Nigeria. Of course, I agree with you. Some people may not be knowledgeable enough to understand English language, which is the language of the portal for now. But I'm very sure that with time, there will be further development on such. That won't be a challenge. But the critical and very important is starting. Having that willpower to embark on this reform, to say, look, in the course of the open governance partnership which the federal government have signed into, we are prepared, we have opened the treasury, we've opened all our transactions to citizens. You can now come in, find out, ask questions, get answers. You can even ask further questions. So the dynamics will be responded to.
Okay, I imagine that this whole thing has made the job of Honorable Bamidele Salam a lot easier, has made the job of a councillor at the local government level a lot easier, because they won't have much to explain if the portal is this liberal across board. For instance, are there plans, or are you already thinking towards this direction, besides what we are doing now, to use other agencies to spread this message across board?
Well, it's very important that these reforms are cascaded to the other tiers, states and local government.
Very key.
It's critical because when you look at it, it's one economy. And to maintain the macroeconomic stability of the nation, you don't just concentrate on the national government, of federal government. There is need also for the other tier states and local government to come to the party. If they don't, that stability will not be there. However, you must also take cognizance of the fact of the fiscal federalism which we're operating in a democratic system. These are obvious challenges for the federal government to implement such reforms. It's left for the states to decide to buy into it. But it's also very important that they should. In fact, the truth is that for every state that has already signed into open government partnership, they must. And that is why I like what the Governors Forum, what they are presently doing. They're embarking on a lot of...
Is it optional or compulsory?
For now, it's optional because of fiscal federalism. But you see, through some mechanisms like the Governors Forum, they now have peer review, opportunities from time to time. I've even attended some of the zonal governors forum where they engage each other, and some states which are leading the trail. Of course, they're obvious. You can see states like Anambra State, Kaduna State, Ekiti State, Lagos, Enugu is also a lot of them. Imo State has just signed into TSA, Treasury Single Account. That means it's an emerging trend. And this comes with some benefits. And in the process of the peer review, they will advise each other. They will compare notes. They will find out state A, what are you doing? What happened? Why were you not able to utilize your bailout funds appropriately? State B will say, look at how I managed mine. In the process, you can see that there will be a lot of improvement. But as of law, you cannot, federal government, for now, the way our constitution is captured, that is a serious challenge. That is even the problem with Fiscal Responsibility Act. Except for the issue of debt, loan, and indebtedness, the provisions cannot apply to states and local government, which I think is a critical law which all states and local should adopt. They should key into. And you find a situation whereby very few states are interested in buying into it. But what amazes me is that the federal government, the Federal Minister of Finance, sometime in 2016, came up with 22 conditions of fiscal sustainability plan to enable these states, all the states, to access the bailout funds. But the level of implementation of such conditions is another thing. These are issues in other climes like India, Brazil, and even Singapore, where fiscal responsibility regime is very successful. There is usually a strict application of such laws to all the tiers. Even where, because of fiscal federalism, you cannot apply, there are conditions, there are incentives that are so tempting that every region must obviously buy into it. There are certain things you will never get from the national government if you've not keyed into their reforms.
Now let's take this tweet from Akin Tunde. Financial transparency and good governance is a laudable policy. Well, hearty greetings to my able representative, Honorable Bamidele Salam, for his well-articulated lines of reasoning devoid of unnecessary political patronage, but premised on objectivity and good conscience. Well, he says he's proud of you.
Thank you so much.
But quickly, the issue of regulation. We have cases where people want to pick loopholes in good initiatives like this to be maybe a cock in the wheel. How do we check it?
Well, before that, please, let me quickly just say something about the need for states to domesticate most of these laws and policies. Now, yes, we operate a system that is, well, called a federal system. There are rooms for improvement, a lot of rooms for improvement for us to be truly federal. But even then, there is something we call the best global practices everywhere in the world. Like Riley said, India and Brazil are very good examples of systems where the fiscal responsibility and public procurement laws have percolated down to all the tiers of government, down to the council government, which is the closest to the people. And when you do this, you capture a larger segment of the procurement process, because now you're talking about 36 states and 774 local governments. And the people who are the owners of the resources that government manage are more in the state and the local government. That is where they are. In fact, in a truly federal system, most of the things that the federal government today handles will be handled by those tiers of government. But the fear again is that if we do that, how are we sure that there will be adequate monitoring of the resources that are entrusted to these tiers of government? So I agree absolutely that we also need more advocacy in the area of ensuring that states, at the last count, I'm not sure we have up to 20 states that domesticated the Fiscal Responsibility Act in Nigeria. I'm not sure we have up to that. The public procurement laws, many states don't have anything like that. So I think we need to do more engagement in that regard. Now you spoke about regulation. What I think is important is, you see, when you start any system, it takes time for you to discover, whatever loopholes that there are in it. And as you continue, you put in place measures to ensure that, one, you avoid abuse. Number two, you also, the point of resistance that some individuals or organizations may want to build will collapse when the system has already become, very well known, and there is enforcement. There are penalties for those who do not, follow strictly the provisions of the law. Wherever you have enforcement and you have consequence for example, if the Office of the Accountant General is supposed to update information from MDAs, and a particular ministry or department or agency refuses or neglects to provide that information at the nick of time, you have consequences for the particular officer that is charged with that responsibility. I want to assure you, and the consequences are enforced. Nobody will continue to do all that. I was talking to one of our leaders recently, and he told me, former governor of Kano State, Alhaji Malam Ibrahim Shekarau, that there was time he visited Singapore, and he was told about the 48-hour policy. What is 48-hour policy? The 48-hour policy is that no file or matter must stay with any particular public official for more than 48 hours. And of course, there are means of tracking these things because most of their systems are, automated. They do these things online. If for over 48 hours you have a matter that you have not attended to, you will have query to answer. And there will be sanctions on you, even as a public officer. So the moment we begin to enforce the rules and begin to have consequences for people, not carrying through that which they need to carry in the implementation of this, initiative, definitely you will find, a greater degree of compliance, going forward. So I think the laws are not just meant for decoration. The initiative is not meant for decoration. It is meant for enforcement, but the enforcement must non-enforcement must come with consequences.
Okay, before I go to Jos and Maiduguri via Skype, let me get you to address this question put forward by Princess Dude. Financial transparency is a great idea, but are there plans or training scheduled to teach the users of this portal, mostly those in the grassroots? It's a question.
Well, just like I told you, the reform just started. It was launched by Mr. President last week. Other issues about it, human capital development and the training processes. For now, it may be difficult, it may look very difficult that government will engage in training people at the grassroots on it. But I think a lot of campaign and public enlightenment can do a lot to help. Training must not be when you gather people to train them. Public enlightenment using the radio and the television and the mass media could really do a lot. I think I see in the future, I see government using that to raise the citizens' understanding of some of these reforms. Because at the end of the day, it's also for the benefits of everybody, including the government, the people in government, and even the governed. Because you will feel a lot better when those you're representing feel that you have nothing to hide. And I think in this case, that is what Mr. President and the government of the day is trying to show. I think everything will be done to ensure that there is enough enlightenment. I even see that in the coming days, maybe some government outfit like National Orientation Agency may even be involved in the enlightenment.
Should. I'm foreseeing it. I'm not to speak at this stage for the federal government. Okay. But it's a possibility because they've done it in other critical areas. They've been engaged in public awareness on other issues. So I think there is a possibility. Citizens will definitely be enlightened, and in the process, they will get to know more about it. Okay, let's go to Jos now. Doctor, one of the worries raised by a viewer from our Twitter handle is how would this outlive this administration and henceforth? In conclusion.
That's a very clear worry, judging from previous experiences over time, and also judging from not only even after the end of this administration, even over time among this administration, will the political interest, will we have this zeal to continue to ensure that this system is made workable and is regularly updated? It's quite a challenge, but it's something that we need to look at, the mechanisms that have been put in place and the kind of structures that have been put around this platform, and to the extent to which the other actors, particularly outside government, the civil society actors, the media, and of course the general citizens, to what extent are they prepared to launch the necessary pressure on government to ensure sustenance of some of these. To say to the workability and responding to some of the fears that have been expressed by some of the speakers on the Twitter, it's true that this mechanism is faced with challenges. A key one is, will the MDS continue to provide this information, or are they going to refuse to provide this information, or lack the capacity to provide this information? And again, like the question you earlier asked, what kind of mechanisms should be put in place in order to ensure compliance? And I think this is very important. For us to ensure compliance, I think there should be clear lines of responsibility. Very clear. From the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation to all the MDS, there should be clear lines of responsibilities, with responsibilities assigned to specific officers who are to be held accountable. And each of those officers will also have his clear terms of reference and work schedules, and with clear framework for explaining the failure of any other personnel within that particular MDA who refused to provide the requisite information. I think that's very important. The second thing is that if the federal government wants this program to work, then they must strengthen the voices. And what I mean by strengthening the voices, who are those people that will speak up, that will speak out? For example, to what functions should the Office of the Auditor General be provided with to communicate with every MDA and to direct those MDAs to provide this information in case of failures? And then finally, once these voices are strengthened, both the civil society, both voices within the government establishment itself, and the regulatory or the authority that is handling the site, as well as the civil society and media that are supposed to provide a supportive role. Then finally is to strengthen the teeth. Like we said, there is no transparency initiative. There is no corruption that you can fight where corruption becomes endemic unless you strengthen the teeth. And the teeth here are the sanctions. So what sanctions? There must be clearly spelled out sanctions for every public sector officer, line officer who refused to perform his responsibilities in accordance to this. And I think if we have this, we may be able to see to the workability of this. And like the acting director has earlier said, we can monitor the progress within the next 3 months, 6 months, and we will continue to update and make the platform more user-friendly, more versatile, and to address all the transparency needs as far as financing of government services and works are concerned in this country.
To Saleh, it was nice sharing your line of thought on this program. It was nice having you. Thank you so much. Okay. Now, Honorable Salam, the legislature has a role to play here, because if we say the Senate and House of Reps, that is complete Nigeria. What do you think you guys can do also to push this information to permeate the fabrics of Nigeria? That's the last word.
Well, the first thing, like I said, is that we ourselves decided that even as an institution, we also need to be more open. If you look at the content of the legislative agenda, which was launched 2 months ago by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, it forms a very central, program of the Ninth Assembly to be more transparent in our own duties, in our own activities, in our own operation, because you cannot give what you do not have. Then the next stage will be to look at the existing laws. If there are areas where we believe, and there are quite areas where we believe that the laws need to be tinkered with, especially the FOI Act, for instance. I know that there are different works on amendment of the Freedom of Information Act that is ongoing, and I'm sure by the month of February next year, there will be a presentation of those bills for consideration on the floor of the House for the amendment of the FOI Act to cure the mischief that we have discovered there that is hampering the effective implementation of the provisions of the law. If there are other laws that are supposed to guarantee, maybe the Fiscal Responsibility Act, if there are areas where we need to work on, we'll work together with the Commission and with the civil society to ensure that these laws are worked upon. And then, above all, we have the constitutional responsibility to ensure that organs of government are accountable to the people. And we are going to ensure that we do more in that regard of oversight, ensuring that government agency responsibilities are responsible to the people and render account as often as required to the legislature and, of course, to other organs of government like the Office of the Auditor General. And so a lot of things are happening, but I'm sure that with this, there will be a lot of reawakening, in critical sectors of the government institution, including the National Assembly itself.
Okay, I deliberately kept you for the last, even if you're not the last. Maybe by way of emphasis, just read back the portal link and tie up just in a few words.
Well, by way of, for those that didn't get the portal to the transparency portal, Open Treasury, one word, .gov.ng, you would have opened the business of the government on financial issues. You will have your questions answered, even when you raise them. I want to use this opportunity to thank Mr. President for keeping to his promise and for his partnership with the Parliament to ensure that they're on the same page to reposition the budget cycle. For us at Fiscal Responsibility Commission, it's a peculiar thing because we've been talking on the timeline. I also appreciate Mr. President for giving the directive on the preparation for 2021.
Let me hold it there. Our time is up. Thank you so much. At this point, I must thank Honorable Bamidele Salam, Member, House of Reps, and Vice Chairman, House Committee on Pensions. It was nice having you.
Thank you very much.
And Acting Chairman, Fiscal Responsibility Commission, Victor Moru Ako. Thanks so much for being here.
Good night, Nigeria.
All our guests who came in through tweets and from Jos, all those who sent in tweets, all those who made phone calls, and for those who could not take their tweets, time is just the constraint. Don't give up. Some other time, we'll take your tweets. Governance is a social contract, and this is one way government is saying we are there and we'll justify what the mandate is all about. That's it on the program. On behalf of all of us, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.